Welcome to the Sencast. My name is Dale Pickles, Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Sencast. The Sencast is here as a way to improve knowledge around SEND. There is a lot of stuff you can go and read, but we're all very busy, and most of us do not have the time to do all that sitting and reading. So the Sencast is a great way to get that message out, and it's a great way to get that same consistent message to schools, external professionals, and parents. My guest this week was Joanna Grace. Jo is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist as well as a doctoral researcher, although she's now done that a bit. She now is a PhD doctor person. So very well done, Jo. And she does lots and lots more as well. And in this episode, we discussed autism, but more specifically, the quiet autistic students. The Sencast is created by us here at B Squared. And one of our frameworks we have in our software is Steps for Life. And this covers functional academic skills, employability skills, and those very important life skills to promote independent living. And the framework covers from the most complex pupils all the way up to functional skills level 2. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through Steps for Life and our other assessment frameworks so you can find out what they can do for your school. Now, let's get on with that podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing autism, and to be specific, on this week's show, the quiet ones. And discussing this with me is Jo Grace. Jo is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist, a hardworking academic with a PhD, an author, a trainer, a TEDx speaker, and the founder of Sensory Projects. Joanna has worked with people with learning disabilities and neurodivergent conditions from birth to old age. Welcome back, Jo.
Thanks for having me back again.
You are very, 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 very welcome. I almost said thank you very much for feeding William, but that's an advert from our childhood. Do you remember that?
No.
Quality Street advert. Thank you very much for feeding William. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very, very much. I didn't realise that it was feeding anybody.
What's the feeding the fish?
Oh, I see.
You give them this thank you with a box of Quality Street.
Well, I'm up for the Quality Street.
Thank you for anyone else who sang along to that as well. When people think of autism, we often think of the disruptive autistic child, the one whose parent just needs to discipline them more, the one having the meltdowns, the one we see because it's hard not to see them. And I've often heard this, and we were saying just before we start recording, not as much these days, but I've previously heard this referred to as the boys' presentation of autism, the rough play and all that sort of stuff. But that is just one presentation. That's not autistic people, and it's also not all boys. But it is the ones that are seen as disruptive. And there are lots of people with autism who do not draw attention to themselves.
Yes. So I often provide trainings to settings linked to being autistic or linked to sensory struggles with behaviour and things like that. And I was delivering a day, I think it was about sensory struggles with behaviour. And so you get a lot of parents of autistic people who express their struggles with the sensory world through their behaviour in ways that don't go down well in other settings, like family dinners or school environments, attending that day. And it's interesting because I'm used to speaking in big rooms full of people, and you kind of get a feel for people as the conversations start. And I was watching, and there was one lady who was joining in with all the conversations, and she was really listening to the other parents. She was such a good, like, she's one of these people that nods and makes noises, and oh, that must have been so hard for you. And you could tell that she was making the parents on her table feel really safe talking to her and really able to talk about their child. And yeah, I had clocked her from the start of the day. I thought she was lovely. And she came up to me in the first tea break and she said, I feel like a bit of an imposter here. I don't really think I should be here. And I was surprised because I had actually noticed her and I thought how lovely it was to have her there. And I asked her why. And she said, well, these people have real problems. And she listed some of the things that she, the lady who was sat next to me, her son is, not going to sleep at night. And the lady who's been sat opposite me, their child is biting other people. And these people have real problems. And my child isn't doing any of those things. And I came today because I'm just worried about them. But I think maybe I'm just a fraud, I'm an imposter. And I had this sliding doors moment where you think, do I tell her that she's right? She doesn't have any problems. Her child is fine. These are the people, she's just met them all. She's just talked to them all. Here are the people with the real problems. And your autistic child is fine and you didn't need to come today. Or do I say, there's probably a reason why you're worried, because you're that child's parent. And just because that child isn't throwing a chair across the room or refusing to eat their dinner or not going to school doesn't mean that you're making up this worry, because it could be this, or it could be, and I have a whole panoply of things that I can offer. Like, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And then you kind of look at her and think, I've got to make a split second decision. Is this the sort of person who is making up worries? Or is this a person with a stressed child? And how do you know from a 1 minute conversation at a tea break? And she stuck in my mind. And I went away and thought about who her child might be and the sorts of things that her child might be facing, dealing with, masking, hiding, struggling with. The sorts of things that if you were somebody who really loved that child, you'd kind of feel off them, rather than there wouldn't be anything that you could point at and say, oh, I've seen them doing this, or they're not doing this anymore. But you would just get that sense, because she was really genuinely worried. And so I made a day for her of all, it was the whole hideous list of, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And also some of the things that you could do to maybe support somebody like that. Because I think it's very apparent that support gets given, not necessarily where support is most needed, but often where the setting offering the support most needs it. It's, support happens when what you do is an inconvenience to them rather than to you. You said at the start about a boy presentation of autism, and you're right, that's not something that we hear so much anymore. And that's a good thing.
It is a good
that we're
thing.
not splitting it. But I remember somebody telling me autistic boys make problems for other people, autistic girls makes problems for themselves, and a kind of broad brush type of thing. And it's that sort of thing. It's what's going on with the quiet ones.
I think I think the boys and the girls, that we're now realizing that it's just two flavors, and both boys and girls can have both flavors. It is that I'm going to simplify it to an extrovert and introvert type approach. One is you're lashing out, and the one is I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to hide from the world. But that one who hides from the world will get skipped on the radar of schools because they're not causing a problem. As you said, if there is a child throwing chairs across the classroom, if there's a child disrupting other children, then we'll get them support so the other children can learn. It's not necessarily getting the child support because they need it.
And those children need support. It's good that they get the support.
But often the reason is because it's impacting everyone else. But the child who sits in the corner, the child who spends every lunchtime in the library reading, not because they love reading, it's because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing out in the playground. They don't understand the rules. So they found something they do like, and that's what they just do.
Yeah, I did a day called Navigating Life as an Autistic Girl. And that wasn't because I was trying to do a gendered presentation of autism. It's just because I was a girl and I used my own experience. And most of the people who attended were parents of autistic girls. There was a school for autistic girls in attendance. And then there was a couple of people from a mainstream setting. And I said to them, why are you here? And the deputy head, and they'd sent their deputy head, which was quite good, she said, we've got X number of autistic boys on roll. We don't have any autistic girls on roll. So I know they must be there. I want to know how to identify them, and I want to know how to support them when I do. And you're like, yeah, she was out there. She's actually out of school on a day looking so she could figure out where they were. She knew they were in there somewhere, but she didn't know how to spot them and she didn't know how to help them. And that's why she turned up. So those things do happen. But yeah, the people who need the support are not necessarily the people, are not only the people who are making a noise about it.
And it might be, and I remember this years ago with Sarah Jane Critchley on Autism in Girls, it's like the perfectionist, the
Yeah.
girl who it gets everything right, gets one question wrong, has a meltdown.
Yeah.
The girl who has a special interest, but it's a bit more nuanced than just lining up cars. It's perhaps into horse riding or something. But there are so many things that it could be, but it's because it's not disruptive. You don't. It doesn't even register.
Yeah. I had an enormously difficult time at school and I got the best grades in my year. I was never in trouble with a teacher. I didn't need any help academically. I helped other people do, Joe's finished her work, she can go and help somebody else. But I would have massively benefited from support. And if I had, I can't do regrets on what I would change about my life. But if there was a version of me now, I would do differently for her what was done for me, because we've got more understanding now. But you could certainly have protected me from a bunch of things that happened further down the line because of things I learned in school. But that's all very, it's all very abstract. We should do a practical.
There's a thing where SEMH is an area of need, but mental health, everyone has their mental health, positive or negative. We all have mental health. And we have mental health lead, but it kind of, if someone's struggling with their mental health, we only really pay attention at the moment is when it starts impacting them academically.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sort it out just because it's impacting their academic. And for me, is I was a quiet autistic. And as we talked earlier today, is I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel worthy enough to create a scene. I didn't feel like anyone would notice, or it would just be. So I never created a scene. I was quiet. I struggled with things. I avoided things. I got well with my work. I helped out in the ICT suite. I basically avoided the things I hated. I didn't understand, but there was no support for me to help me understand. It was just, and I see memes, and it was like, how are you gifted and talented people getting on in life now? I bet you're really struggling. And I was like, what? And it was a gifted and talented program when I was at secondary school, and I went on it. And it basically is for neurodivergent people. And it, like, I bet you're all struggling now. It's like, yeah, yeah. And they went through it and were like, yeah, we didn't need help academically. We need help in other ways, but they, some reason, just focus on the academic side.
Yeah. So I have an autistic child, and I look at teaching him the incidental things that non-autistic people learn just on instinct. I remember when I was a special school teacher, we had somebody from the visual impairment team come in to talk to us about how to support the children that we had who were blind. And I had some children with very significant visual impairments in my class at that time. So my ears pricked up, I'm listening. And one of the things that she said that caught my attention, she said it's really important to teach the incidental learning that sighted people gain access to. And you're like, what? And she said, for example, you have to teach blind children that there is a ceiling in a room. And you're like, oh, yeah, because they feel the floor, they bump into the walls, but they don't have any relationship to the ceiling. And you never have to teach a sighted child that there's a ceiling because they can see it. And we never go, oh, that is the ceiling. So a blind child doesn't, on instinct, know what a ceiling is because they don't encounter it. And it's like that patch, but an autism version of it. So I watched my son plays football in a little local club. So at the weekends, I am standing in fields in the cold weather, watching small children play football, and adults take it way too seriously. And he was standing on the sidelines with me because his team is playing and he's not on. And there's other kids who are also not playing, but a kid from another team came running up to him and he went, "Hi, my name's Michael and I go to such and such school." And he looked at my son and my son just looked at him. Michael waited a bit longer and then Michael ran away. And I said to my son, "Why didn't you speak to him?" And he said he didn't ask me a question. I was like, "No, but like, why do you think he ran up to you and told you his name and told you what school he went to?" He said, "Well, you'd have to ask him that. He's the one who did it." Like, so there's incidental learning here. Like, if somebody speaks to you, they might be trying to make friends with you. Michael very clearly wanted to play with my son, but my son totally didn't get that. And I didn't have any friends at school, not until I was much older. And I would have really liked people to play with. And maybe people were running up to me and going, "Hi, my name's Michael." And I was just sort of staring at them and waiting for them to ask a direct question. It wasn't the other children's fault that I wasn't included. It is difficult to communicate across a neurodivide. And that bridging, it was not my fault either, but that bridging of the neurodivide can be really helpful for everybody, for the quiet ones who are neurodivergent, and for other people who are going missing in these conversations.
And it is that child who keeps to themselves. Are they keeping to themselves? Or are they exactly in that situation where they're going, well, no one's asked me my name. No one
invited me to play, so
Yes.
I'm not playing it because nobody formally invited me to play.
Yeah. Just so many times you sit there and go, oh. And I know that I think I learned to socialise when I was in work and things. I was about 16, and it was like almost whatever's said to you, you say your version back. And if someone asks, I still find myself, someone goes, "Oh, how are you today?" I'll tell them all, and I forget to ask them back.
Yes, that's really important. Small talk is a really, really tricky thing. And that's saying your version of things back. You have to be very careful with that because it depends what they said at the start. If what they said at the start had some sort of emotional content to it, this is now just workshopping for autistic people. So, okay, this is what I've learned, Dale. If what they said at the start is information, like I went on holiday to Japan, then you're allowed to listen to that, comment on that, and then say, I went on holiday to Turkey, and that's fine. If what they say at the start has an emotional content, like I've broken up with my boyfriend and I'm very sad, then you are not allowed in neurotypical parlance to say your version of it back. What you must say is, I've heard that you have broken up with your boyfriend. You are very sad about that. You're right to be very sad about that. I'm sorry that you're sad about that. If, however, the person saying the emotional thing is an autistic person, so the autistic person says, I've broken up with my boyfriend, I'm very sad about it, you should not say, oh, you've broken up with your boyfriend, you're very sad about it, because they will sit there and think, I just told you that. Why are you saying that? What you have to do is go, I understand, because I have also had, and then you need to kind of evidence your understanding. It's not good enough to just go, I understand that you're upset. You've got to prove your understanding by offering an example from your life that's a matching emotional experience. So you go, I broke up with somebody once and I was very upset. And that's evidence. But if you do that to the neurotypical person, they will think that you're trying to make their sadness about you, and it's offensive. And so it's how you express empathy across a neurodivide. The old notion that autistic people lack empathy is built off an idea that we're not expressing empathy correctly because there is a correct way of expressing empathy. When actually, when it's been studied, and you will have talked about Damien Milton's work on the podcast before, I'm sure. Damien Milton is an autistic researcher who studied empathy in autistic people.
Yes, we've discussed this.
And he looked at how people express. So to give a simplified version of his work, not because you need it simplifying, just because the long version would be much longer. He took pairs of people, you get two neurotypical people, and you test whether they can understand the emotional landscape of the other, and they can. You get two autistic people, and you test whether they can understand the emotional landscape of the other, and they can. And then you get a neurotypical person and an autistic person. You find out whether the neurotypical person can understand the emotional landscape of the autistic person. Not so much. Whether the autistic person can understand the emotional landscape of the neurotypical person, reasonably all right at it. Not as good as they are at understanding other autistic people, but okay. And so we actually scored higher on empathy. And it's not because we are more empathetic. It's just we've had more practice at trying to understand
someone
across
else's world,
a neurodivide because of that pressure. And you do also get autistic people who don't express empathy, full stop, just as you get neurotypical people who don't express empathy, full stop. So how you communicate across a neurodivide and how you're understood across a neurodivide can be hugely complicated for people, especially when you're young and at school, because you're just watching it happen around you thinking, what the hell is going on? And you just stay quiet and hunker down and just wait for it all to make sense. And it takes a really long time before it makes the slightest bit of sense.
And we can have people who are just drowning in empathy, where everything is believed to be their fault. And also they really avoid horrible conversations because they completely know what's going to happen and how that person's going to feel. So they avoid the whole thing. And also, I'd just like to point out that Joe gave you a really great way of identifying if people are autistic. I'm joking here, but it's a really good signal. If you get back from a holiday and start talking about your holiday, and very quickly the whole conversation is owned by the other person and their holiday they went on years ago, it's quite a good indicator that they've not get that you've just got back from your holiday and you're really excited and want to talk about it.
They've understood that the conversation is about holidays and they've joined in with the conversation because you wanted to have a conversation. They're doing communication. You set the it's
a good indicator.
It's one of those incidental learnings that other people will pick up on instinct and that some people might have to be overtly taught. And there's lots of things that I will need to teach my son if he's to communicate across a neuro divide that he's not going to learn on instinct. And you can support the quiet ones by being explicit about what these things are. And you don't appreciate how much skill. So like small talk is a fantastically skilled thing. And I have been very disinterested in having small talk for most of my life. There's a throwaway comment that autistic people are good at big talk and rubbish at small talk. Like I am, if you want a really intense conversation about a serious topic, I'm your girl. If you want to make small talk about the weather, I'm at a loss. And I only learned what it was for a few years ago. And you can ask me if you don't know. But the skill of it is extraordinary. So think about, I used to work in a school and you make small talk with the other members of staff because you don't have time to make big talk and you mustn't ignore people because that's rude. So as you interact with people, this is my learning. You see, I've learned this. You mustn't not talk to them. You must talk to them, but don't say too much. They don't actually want to know. They've got enough on their own plate. They just want small bits of information that have no consequence, that you don't have to remember, things like that. That's the content of small talk. And there's a kind of timing thing. So I used to practice my small talk for work. And it's very easy to practice sort of weekend because on a Monday morning, people will say, "Hi, how was your weekend?" So if you've prepped a little bit of small talk that's relevant to your weekend, then you're going to ace small talk on a Monday morning. And this is one of the things that I do with my son is I get him to think about what the small talk in a situation he's going into might be so that he can have something that he might say. And he's totally disinterested in joining in, but I'll work on that later. And I have also worked with the rest of the children in his class. So I'm not just doing it from the one end. But I've got my like weekend phrase. So you have something like, "Yeah, we had a great time. We had a barbecue. Doug sat on the cat." And it's really important to get the tone of those things right. Because if you say, "Yeah, I had a great time, but we had a barbecue and Doug sat on the cat," then people get worried about your cat and think that they have to ask about vet's bills and things like that. And tone of voice is something that autistic people often get wrong. So I would drive to work on a Monday morning practicing my small talk sentence out loud in the car so that I know, like you're rehearsing for a play type of thing. So I know that I've got the tone just right. I've got the comedy timing of Doug sat on the cat. It's going to be a great little small talk interaction. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be walking down the corridor to your classroom and somebody's going to be walking in the other direction and they're going to say to you, "Hi, how was your weekend?" Now you have a degree of control over this because depending on when you look at them, that's when the conversation will start. So if you wait until you're too close together, that's really dangerous because if they go, "Hi, how was your weekend?" You go, "It was great. Doug sat on the cat." You have to ask them how their weekend was before you have walked past them. So you have to go, "Doug sat on the cat. How was your weekend?" And they must have finished answering before you cross over because otherwise you have to stand still. And if you stand still, then you're into a higher level of small talk that you've not prepped for. So the best thing I would say is to start looking at them from very far away and ask first, "How was your weekend?" Because now you're not the bad person. So long as you've asked, they might end up not asking you how your weekend was. That's them being the bad person. So long as you've asked, you're fine. So you go, "Hi, how was your weekend?" They go, "Oh, blah, 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 small talk." And then they go, "How was your weekend?" And you're getting closer and closer down the corridor. You go, "Oh, it was great. We had a barbecue. Doug sat on the cat. Ha." And they laugh and you walk off and it's perfect. But the number of things that you have to manage in your head in order to get that 2 sentences worth of small talk right is extraordinary. The database kind of processing that I do in order to have that small exchange. And then other people just go around just doing it naturally. They're amazing that they can do that thing. Bless you.
I think for 5 years, that's my first sneeze on the
Oh,
podcast. It's quite good.
We're honoured. We're honoured. But those little bits of incidental learning, if you're not understanding that stuff, then so often you will be slipping out of the social milieu and disconnecting and glitching in conversations, or saying the wrong thing, or oversharing is a really common autistic one.
But those rules are not something you literally found in Women's Own at some point,
No,
or
I
some
have
other random.
studied their kind. I
You have
have
studied
watched them
their
from the
kind.
sidelines.
And that's the thing is, if you're literally listening to Joe going, what are you on about? That is a very big difference between a neurotypical and an autistic brain. Is that what Joe does and focuses on? I do my stuff in different ways. But it's that kind of level in different kind of, you just say hi and you move on.
Oh, it used to go wrong for me. If people, because they don't always play by the rules. So if they don't ask you, hi, how was your weekend? Because I've already got, it was great, I sat on the cat, ready to go. So if they walk down the corridor and go, have you got the marking for the Key Stage 2 SATs? And you go, it was great, we had a barbecue, Doug sat on the cat. Then they go, what? And then I panic. And normally when I've gone wrong in social situations, it's because I haven't said please or thank you or sorry. So I'll just say all of them. So they go, have you got the marking for the Key Stage 1 SATs? I go, it was great. We had a barbecue. Doug sat on the cat. They go, what? And I go, please, sorry, thank you. And then they just stand still and look panicked. So like, she's malfunctioned. She's malfunctioned. And then it's best just to walk away.
And that's why you have some children in your school who choose not to
talk.
interact socially.
Yeah, just don't. I never did it at school. No, I just stayed quiet.
It's a thing. I think you talk about that kind of, I talk about learning through osmosis. It gets absorbed, that learning on how to have conversations. And for some children, they just watch and or not even know they're watching, but it just goes in and this is how you talk. But I think with autism, it's explicit learning.
You won't know, like the blind child won't know that there's a roof on the building. You won't necessarily instinctually understand the social landscape around you. You might understand an autistic social landscape. And it is really lovely if you have autistic children, if you can get them into autistic spaces so that they can have those interactions with their neurokin and not feel weird and out of place. But it's really common for autistic adults to have thought when they were children that they were aliens, that they had been sent to Earth to study their kind. And that's what I did as a small child. I stood on the edge of playgrounds and I watched because I was trying to figure out what was going on. And I didn't cause any fuss or bother. But it would have been such a head start for me if somebody had taken me aside and gone, by the way, this is what's going on. It saved me a lot of time and effort.
And with my daughters, you sit there and you just pick up on things that they're not doing. I can give them a little tip. So it's like, a great one is, if he says, have a nice day, it's like, what do you say back? You go, oh, it's quite simple. You say, thanks, you too. It's quite a nice, simple phrase. Generally, you can use it all the time, apart from in a couple of situations. When someone's putting your dinner down on a table. Enjoy your dinner. Thanks, you too.
Yeah, yeah.
Or enjoy your flight. Thanks, you. There are a couple of times where it doesn't work. And it's kind of like, and my daughter did it. She went, oh, I died. I'm like, yeah, but you've learned that additional rule, which I probably forgot to tell you. And it's just about building up those rules. But it really helps if someone's helping you on those first few rules. So if someone's not socializing, it's not because they've chosen not to. It's probably they just don't understand the rules or what's going on, what's expected of them, or the game, or whatever it is. Don't assume it's a choice. It's more, I don't understand what's going on.
And different styles of play in the way that the autistic community generally, not all autistic people, and the neurotypical community generally have different ways of expressing empathy. We also generally, not always, have different styles of play. And so I notice it between my sons. I have one autistic son and one neurotypical son. And playing with each of them is very different. And recently I was chatting to the autistic son about his experience of playing with his brother. And he said, it's really different playing with Elias, mummy, to playing with you. And I was like, yeah, it is. Why is that? He said, when you play with Elias, he plays at you. But when I play with you, you play with me. And you're like, and you kind of watch. And what he means is that when he and I play, we will engage in what's called parallel play. So I'll set up an activity there'll be something to make or something to color, and we will both do the activity side by side. We are building the Lego thing, coloring in. But when you play with his brother will use the activity as a way of interacting with you. So it would be, pass me the Lego bricks, look at my building. And he's not playing with the bricks, he's playing with you. You're the thing he's playing with. He's just using the bricks to do it. Whereas when I play with the autistic child, the thing that is being played with is the bricks, and we are doing that activity together. And there's this notion that parallel play is a disconnected thing, but I feel very with that child when we do the thing together, because we are doing that thing. And I feel, I was going to say attacked, which isn't a nice way to talk about your 4-year-old, but like really like got at by the one that plays with me, but like where I'm the object, I'm the toy, I'm the thing. It doesn't feel collaborative to me. It feels very bewildering, but it's just different natural styles to play. And if you've got autistic children in a playground, like there couldn't be a harder landscape. There's nothing defined. There's no start and finish. There's no clues. There's just open space. What are you supposed to do? How is really simple strategies that you see schools put in, like having play leaders who lead like a little game of hopscotch or a skipping game, or organize a little game with, bowling at things. So there's a little bit of structure. You've got an activity that I can now do, and somebody can do it with me so I can play with. But when there's no activity, when there's only other people to play with, and how am I going to play with them when I play by parallel play? So things like that, where you have people on the sidelines who I would have been described as somebody who is content in her own company, who played happily by herself, who made up little imaginary worlds and was okay on my own. I have a diary that I kept when I was 8 years old. And it was a little flick book. So one of these books that were for making little cartoons on. So it's very small. It's like smaller than a postcard, just long, thin, white pieces of paper. And every day, I didn't write in it, I would draw a picture. Every day as I went to bed, I would get this little book out from under my pillow and I would draw a picture, not of what had happened in the day, but what I imagined would have happened if I had had a friend. And so I would draw like a little picture of me throwing a ball to somebody else, or a little picture of me sat on a bench talking to somebody else. And it was a particular girl that I wanted to be friends with. So it was always this little curly haired child was in the picture. And I have a whole year of little 8-year-old pictures of imagining having I didn't ever imagine having lots of friends. I just thought one would be nice. And these things have payoffs in later life. You like, if that is your child now, if your child is a version of me now, know that as an adult, I keep in contact with my friends like nobody's business, compared to my neurotypical friends who had loads of friends at school. Like my friends really, really matter to me because I have so many memories of just dreaming about having a friend. But I wouldn't have looked like somebody who was struggling. I wouldn't have caused any fuss or bother.
And that's a bit there. It doesn't look like they're causing it. They seem to be happy alone. They're quite content. That is almost like if I say that to myself, I don't have to do anything about that child. And I think all children want to have friends. There's very few, if any, but it's having someone on their same page. It's understanding the expectations, the boundaries, all those things. But when a child, you don't understand your boundaries or your rules. So it's helping someone learn all of those things. It's important because I think if you don't, and we know through stuff like communication, interaction, all the research that low communication skills and really bad mental health are very, very linked. So if you have got somebody who isn't communicating, isn't developing those skills, that's going to have a really negative impact on their mental health. And just because they're not throwing chairs doesn't mean that negative impact isn't there.
Yeah. And the other thing that kind of links in is that autistic children are at increased risk of bullying in school and of being in relationships where they're being controlled. So if somebody had come up to me and told me that the way to play the game was, X, Y, and Z, I would have believed them and I would have done it. And I met a parent I was doing a Quiet Ones day, and she was saying that she had thought that her little girl had a group of friends at school. And then they'd bumped into one of her friends in the shops during a school holiday. And she'd said hello to the mum, and she'd said to the other little girl, "Oh, you must come round and play with, Maisie someday soon." And the other little girl just kind of blanked her, turned to her mum and went, "Do I have to?" And she had thought that this little girl was her little girl's friend because her girl had been coming home from school and saying, "We are friends." And then she realized in that interaction with her mother that the other little girl really did not like her daughter at all. And her daughter has misunderstood the social landscape. And probably what's going on is that they're talking to her and teasing her and saying nasty things. And her daughter doesn't realize that she's being bullied. And so it can be very easy for people who are out of kilter with the social world or who are running because there's a narrative that we're getting it wrong. And I could defend a lot of autistic communication. Like it seems right to me, like makes sense to me. And I do it sometimes as an analogy between cats and dogs. Like if you are a cat born into a world of dogs, the dogs will look at you and think your communication is terrible because you don't wag your tail at the right time. You don't growl at the right time. If the dogs really care about you, they'll be terribly worried about your poor communication, and they'll try and teach you to wag your tail at the right time and to growl, not when you're stroked, but when other people do aggressive things. And over time, if a lot of dogs work on this together, they might teach you to wag your tail when dogs find things happy. And you haven't really helped the cat any in that situation. Even if you get the cat to behave perfectly like a dog, you haven't fixed the cat. You've just got a very broken cat. And I think quite a good chunk of the narrative about autistic people not being good at communicating is just dogs judging cats, because we're all right at communicating with each other. Like I have autistic friends and I go around and I go, "Here's the topic." And then I just sit there and listen.
But
And then I have a turn. It was this cutting it up into small bits so that nobody has enough time to say anything useful. What's that all about?
But also, I think I think with autistics is if I said something, it's exactly what I meant.
Yes.
Whereas in the neurotypical world, how are you is really saying,
Oh, so that's an important one on the small talk. Yeah, because they'll go,
they're not asking how you are.
when it's not Monday, when they're not going, "How's your weekend?" They go, "Hi, how are you?" And the answer is fine. Thank you. How are you? It's
Yeah.
not a question.
Yeah. It's those sorts of things where actually that's the weird communication. That's the like, "Oh, how's the weather?" Basically, is we're going to walk along here, but instead of uncomfortable silence, we're going to talk about something really
Yeah.
random.
So
Whereas I think autistic people are quite happy with silence.
silence or monologue, either or.
Yes.
That's fine. But this is it. I deliver training all around and I get to speak at conferences and do things like this. And since I have been out on the road speaking at events, I have accessed way more training than I ever did when I was a teacher because I get to attend all the events that I speak at. And so I regularly listen to these other speakers and learn all these things. And about 5 years ago, I was at an event and I learned from a speaker at that event what small talk is all about. So up until that point, so I'm well into my 40s. So for a good 40 years, I just thought it was pointless. I remember working at a school and there was a little group of PE teachers. It was a secondary school, big secondary school. And you went up at lunch break and the PE teachers all sat in one corner and the music teacher also sat with the PE teachers, which was odd because most other people are sitting in their little subject groupings. And the PE teachers would be there first because I presume they just told the children to get changed and then they came up to the lunch early and the music teacher would join them and the music teacher would eat her lunch and then she would have a yogurt for pudding every day. And every day, this group of about 5 women, when she got her yogurt out, they would all start going, oh, don't point that at me. Oh, careful. Oh, watch out. Is it loaded today? Because at some point, prior to my even being at that school, so I don't know how many years they've been doing it before I was there, but I was there for 3 years. She'd opened her yogurt at lunchtime and a small bit of yogurt had flown out of her yogurt and landed on one of the PE teacher's trousers. And it's sort of like it's the PE teacher's trousers. They've already got mud on their trousers and things like that. It's not like it's the geography teacher. The geography teacher had amazing trousers. It's just PE teacher trousers. And they talked about that yogurt every lunchtime for 3 years. And it was like, it used to drive me up the wall because they were lovely people. They'd got really interesting hobbies. Like they'd got great subject knowledge. We could have solved world peace in the time that they spent talking about her yogurt. And at no point did she ever spill her yogurt. Like 3 years of talking about yogurt. What? And then I was at this conference and it was a speech on the fundamentals of communication. And the person delivering it was talking about how we've learned a lot about communication from chimps and watching how chimps interact with each other. And you're like, okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm ready for that. I did the philosophy of language at university and we've learned a lot about it from bees as well. And he was showing videos of chimps grooming each other. And you know how chimps will pick the bugs and pick the knots out of each other's fur. And he was showing that they do this in hierarchical order. And so if you are the big boss chimp, lots of little chimps will groom your back. But if you're a little runty chimp, probably only other one little runty chimp will groom your back. And if you want to overthrow a boss, then you will decide to groom somebody else. And there's all this, the ways and the patterns in which the grooming happen are all really integral to the social structure of chimp community. And you're like, fine, I get that, good. And he said, but what's been observed is that they groom each other even when they don't need to be groomed. So they mime picking ticks out of each other's fur and they pretend to unknot fur. And they're like, why are these chimps pretending to pick bugs out? Why are they like doing this work when there's no actual work to do? And he put that to us and you're like, no, that's really weird. Why are they doing that? And he said it's so that they can maintain their understanding of the social hierarchy, so that they can express to each other their willingness to help each other. And it was like, it was such a big penny drop moment to me because I realized that if I had talked about yogurt, I would have been saying to those women, if you ever need help, I will help you. Yeah. If you're the little runty chimp and I untangle your fur, I'm saying, even though you're bottom of the pile, I would help you if you need help. And I was sat there in that lecture. I was like, I've got to learn to talk about yogurt. I've got to learn to talk about the weather. And I've been working really, really hard to up my small talk game since that lecture. That's partly why I know the speed of, communication down the corridor and when you make eye contact and all of that is because we've got to get this stuff right so that so that you can say to people, I'd be there for you. That's what it is.
Wow.
I'll have to tell my son that.
In my head, it was kind of something like that. It was kind of like, in my head, it was, I want to show that we're connected, but I don't want to reveal anything about myself. That's with small talk.
I don't want to
generally
burden
nothing.
you with any information or any emotional.
Yeah.
Just with froth.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my head, it's that sort of thing, but it is like there are so many rules to that. And it is, you always have these inside jokes with friends, which continue on miles past. They were ever funny. But it is that.
There's an autistic tendency to amp small talk up into something more interesting very quickly. So a common expression that autistic women hear, and I'm sure some autistic men as well, is that we're too intense. So I can take a small talk conversation to a big talk conversation with surprising speed. And it's really heavy to be around me at parties because if you just want to have fun and talk about light stuff, I am forever making it terribly earnest and serious. And I really, really mean the stuff I say as well. It's not fake. Like I really, really care about the stuff that I care about. And I'm knackered from listening to it in my head. So I don't know why anybody would opt to just hang around with it.
But half the time it's like, if you're going to have a conversation with someone, yes, there is the passing the corridor. There's that sort of stuff. There's the, while you make a cup of tea, yep, 30 seconds, yep, weather, football, what do you do at the weekend? What do you do next weekend?
You're better at these things than me.
Well, usually I have the list of questions. I have bullet points in my head. But once you get past it, if I'm going to go like sit down for lunch with you, if I'm going to get in the car and drive for an hour and a half, or if I'm going to sit on the train, it's like, let's have a decent conversation. Let's talk about something.
But it's so dangerous. I gave a friend that I didn't know that well a lift somewhere, and I think it was a 4-hour car journey there, and then another. Over the course of about 2 days, we must have spent a good 12 hours in the car with one another, and she knows absolutely everything about my life. We got out of the car and said, we must never look at each other again because you know too much. It's like, because if you ask me, I'll tell you.
Because me and John, who's a host of the podcast, and we're doing some more, and I've known him for years, but we go up to like the education show or whatever show, and we'll jump in the car and we'll drive for 3-4 hours. Let's say if you're like going up to Autism Show Manchester. From here, that's about 4 hours in the car. We're stopping off for some food, and then we'll set up talking. And then we'll go to the hotel, talking, having a half hour in our rooms, and then we'll meet in the bar, and then we'll go for dinner, and then we'll go back to the bar, and then we'll go to bed about 11 o'clock. And from the moment we've left the office till going to bed, we spent the entire time together, apart from maybe 45 minutes in our rooms. And then we kind of do that. So we wake up in the morning, have breakfast together, go to the show, spend the entire day on the stand talking between customers, then get back, have a break, and then bar, then restaurant, then bar, and then like repeat for another day, and then travel home. And it's the amount of time we spend with each other is insane. But we both love it because it's like we get to go on to those topics that maybe you've thought about, but have gone to the back of your brain because you've not had someone to talk about. And they all come out, and we both absolutely love it because it is really meaningful, interesting, theoretical conversations that we don't get to have.
And in that space, it's safe. But if you have me at 13 and somebody at school asks me, something private, they've asked the question, I will answer the question. And then they have that information on you. And I'm not, if you looked at my output now as an adult, you would probably still say Joe's oversharing. If people ask, I will answer. And I think if my life lived is useful to you, then you can have it. I don't hold it. I'm not careful with it. One of the things that when I was doing my PhD, I was writing up aspects of that work. My supervisors were editing it, and I don't normally have anybody editing. And they would edit out things that exposed me and made me vulnerable in an online space. And you think, I don't have a natural filter like that. I'm not careful. I will just trust you. I will accept what you say. I will answer the question because I thought you wanted to know the information. And there's a sort of naivety to it. But you could look at it as naive, or you could just go, no, it makes sense. They asked the question, you answered the question. Why is this wrong?
So one of the things, you've shared a grid with me.
Oh, yeah.
I literally
it's like
just looked
bingo.
at it, and I just saw the word knowledge dumping, which is which is more or less what we just like to be talking about. Is just that start me off on a topic, wind me up, and let me go.
Yes, that's it. So I have a grid of things that I made for that lady with the child who she was worried about, and it's things that child could have been struggling with, things that might be a way of her offering support to that child, and things to celebrate about that child, things that they're likely to be good at. And knowledge dumping, that's a really lovely way to connect with autistic people, is you ask them for information about something they know about, and then you listen to them. And it's a ridiculous one for me because I've made a career out of it. I get paid to do it. So I am living the autistic dream. But I try and do it with my son. He's interested in things that I'm not particularly interested in. But if you ask him and then you let him talk about what he's interested in, that's a lovely way of connecting with an autistic person and expressing care and creating a bond. It's not small talk. And it's recognized as like an autistic love language, love locution, knowledge dumping.
But it's the sort of thing is, again, if we're talking about the quiet ones, is they're not going to be expressing much, they're not going to be sharing much. So getting into that knowledge dumping and listening is kind of creating that very safe place that they can talk to you and share things with you. And what you're trying to get into is share those things, because you've got that, there's a phrase in here, you've got internalized ableism, but that internalization, if they're used to kind of being alone and feeling like no one understands and no one cares, or they're internalizing that they're just different and they don't understand, is you need to find that connection with them.
Find spaces where they can share those interests. So my son is learning to code. I'm sure there are lots of places where I can find other people who are very interested in code and can talk to him about C# more than I can. When there is that disconnect, you are taught to think that it is because you are wrong. And that lesson lasts a very long time. And it sets a pattern that you then apply again. Like anytime I meet a miscommunication, even just like a low level one where I've said something to my husband and one of us has got the wrong end of the stick, I will always believe it's my fault because I'm the autistic one. So of course it's my fault. And I'm understanding it like that as well. I'm understanding it as somebody is wrong and somebody is right and it's my fault and I am bad. And it gets a very muddled thing very quickly. And it's weird internalized ableism because when I was writing The Subtle Spectrum, I was reading all this research about autistic people that is horribly prejudiced and reading various, online content and things like that where people describe autistic people in very pathologizing ways. And of all the places I've met prejudice against autism, the hardest place that I've met it is in me. And I advocate for autistic people and on behalf of autistic people. And I do things like this, but I will sit at home, late at night and think maybe it would be better if I wasn't autistic, if people weren't autistic, maybe I'm wrong. And that is like the internalized ableism is there underneath all of the other stuff. And I can answer that. If somebody said that to me, I would have an answer for it. But it's just, yeah, that quiet child will be thinking, could be thinking, it's their fault. And the reason that they can't play with the other children is because they're not as good as the other children. I viewed the other children's opinion of me to be my first experience of objective judgment. I figured my family have to love me. So, of course, they like me. This is a jury of my peers, and they've decided not to play with me. And this is the first honest opinion that I'm encountering in the world. And I will always believe that in some way. And then because you've got that, you are at risk, the increased risk of bullying. You'll take stuff that people say to you for longer because you believe them. Like I believe the things that my bullies told me. I probably still believe the things my bullies told me. And autistic people are more at risk of bullying in adulthood than non autistic people. We're more at risk of bullying in the workplace than non autistic people. And we're more at risk of bullying within relationships than non autistic people. And I have been bullied in all of those spaces very successfully. I was bullied out of a job. I have to be careful to not overshare. But, you have that mother was worried for really good reasons because the stuff that undermines us as adults is fed into us as children. It's experiences that we're building there, standing on the sidelines, watching quietly, and they're very difficult to unpick later down the line.
I'd love to, if we were in a multiverse, go and find Joe that had a childhood where being autistic was just an indifferent thing that made no impact, positive or negative, and kind of see where that Joe ended up. Because that's the sort of thing. It's how you feel about yourself is not something you're born with. It's something that is given to you as an unwanted present during your childhood that you can never give back. It's there with you for life.
I had a lovely childhood in many ways. So I can't really engage with the what if a different version of Joe. But the one I do is if there was a girl like me now, what would I want for them? And I would definitely want there to be more. I spent a lot of time just watching and trying to keep out of it. So I locked myself in toilet cubicles for most of school. So I was in the supermarket recently and I walked past 3 of the popular girls that were at my school. And I kind of know them now through the window of Facebook. So I sort of see their posts and I almost went, oh, hi, because we're adults now. And I don't expect that. I know that they weren't being nasty to me. They just didn't know how to play with me. They weren't nasty people. They're perfectly lovely people. I witnessed their lives unfold on Facebook. Several of them have had neurodivergent children and they go, oh, turns out I go to school with somebody who knows about this stuff and they get in contact. And so I have connections with them now. But I walked past these 3 girls in the supermarket and I almost went, oh, hi, so-and-so and so-and-so. But they didn't react to me at all. And as you walk past, you think, oh, God, it's school again. They're blanking me. And then I walked a bit further on, you think, no, they just wouldn't know what I look like because they didn't see me at school because I was locked in the cubicles. Like, they're not blanking me. They just don't recognize me. And it would have been nice to have spent less time locked in the toilet cubicles.
There's also a thing I think of being so observant is you obviously saw them process who they were, went, it's those lot from school, and then moved on. Whereas actually, did they even notice you or
No,
register you
no.
or recognise you and go, hang on, did I know that face? And go, no. And it's that sort of thing. There is a whole thing around that. Obviously, we always talk about that process of extra information. I am so much more observant than my wife. I will see things. I will be already working who that person is I've seen or what film they've been in or something. And I'll say, and just as I'm about to give the answer, my wife is about to ask me, have we seen them in a film? And it's that, and I don't have to IMDb, I watch it in my head, but there is that, I think, process information that you sit there and go, oh, I've recognized them. They must have recognized me. And no, that's just, I think, neurodivergent processing and going through all that stuff.
I mean, I don't always recognize. I was on the side of my son's football, standing in the cold on a Sunday morning, and a mother from one of the other teams is also there. And we're like all cagoled up. You're just like peering out of the hood of your coat and holding onto your coffee and trying to survive. And this woman from the other team went, oh, Joe. And I had no idea who she was. And I couldn't see very much of her because her coat was all round her face. And and it could be anybody because I'm on the side of football. So is it somebody from my work life now? Is it somebody that knows my husband? Who is this person? And then she said something else that indicated we'd gone to school together. And you're like, right, okay. So I've got a parameter. I don't know which school, but I went to a school with you. And then you're looking at the small amount of like middle-aged woman face that you can see through the coat and trying to work out what it would look like if it was 40 years younger, and then matching it up with the 60 other girls in my year at school and like trying to figure out. And I named a random blonde girl because I could see that she was blonde. And that's an advantage people have when they're recognizing me from school because I still have my hair in the same hairstyle that I wore it when I was 8. Most people have got a bit more sophisticated through time. But I went, Tamsin. And she was like, oh, no, I'm not Tamsin. But we did used to get mistaken for each other. And then she told me who she was. And we were chatting about what we'd done since school. And she runs a little business locally. And I was like, I do this thing. And she said, oh, my son is just being on the pathway for diagnosis. And I was like, oh, I talked a bit about that. And I'd said really early on in the conversation that I was autistic, that I, write books and do this business. And then there was a pause. And we watched the football game for a bit. And then she looked at me and she said, what's your take on this? She said, because it wasn't so much of it about when we were at school. Was there? Like, where were they when we were at school? And I'm literally standing next to her. Like, I was it. but and there was no, like, and I was trying to think then, like, how could she have spotted me? If what would you have looked for to spot me then? And it is things like that, glitchy small talk. They're not playing. I didn't look like I was playing or didn't look like I was willing to play. Saying slightly the wrong things in conversation, like answering too honestly or taking it too literally. And those things, and really strong sense of right and wrong is another one that is a very common autistic trait, that sense of justice and fairness and a lack of willingness. You get a kind of split. You get some people who just won't follow the herd because they do what they decide to do. They do the right thing. And if everybody else is doing the wrong thing, they won't do it. Or you get people who go, I will do what the other people do because that's what like we are supposed to do. And then they're very easy to lead into, if you're somebody who's looking to get somebody into trouble, then you can tell them that that's the thing to do and they get themselves to it. But looking back, I would have been very easy to spot if you're looking through a modern lens. But at the time, where were they all when we were at school?
Quite a few of them, we just blended in very well.
Yeah.
They were, child perfectionist. You got the child who took things too seriously.
Got too upset about things.
Got too upset
overreacted.
because the other team got a goal and it was clearly not a goal.
Yes. Really stickler for the rules. No
That
flexibility.
Kid who just had that special interest. The old bloke who always has the same bar stool and the same tankard, sits in the same
he's
chair.
in every pub. Yeah.
Talking the same stories. And you go, oh, go ask him about this because everyone knows the stories he's going to tell you. And you're like, they were all there. They were just the quirky characters in our towns and villages. They were there. They were just different. But they're also the ones that everyone in your town, you go, do you remember? Yes. And you'll know that person. Yeah, apparently autism didn't exist. So, have we covered everything?
No, but we could never do that in one go.
But it's one of those things if you are a teacher in your class, have a think about maybe a child who is quiet, not really on your radar, is quite a loner. Maybe they like reading, or you think they just love reading. Just ask the question, are they reading because they love it, or are they reading because it's the only thing that they're certain about? They'd love to do something else and don't know the rules.
You can just do a head count, like that teacher who came on the training day. She said, we've got this many autistic boys on roll. Where are the girls?
And it is interesting because it's like a 4-to-1 ratio diagnosis in schools or something, but in adult life, it's 1-to-1.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at people who have high support needs, it's 1-to-1 as well. So, and we know that it has genetic roots, so you would expect it to be spread in a similar way to the spread of all sorts of genes.
So, I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you for coming on the show today, Jo. And you've given me, as always, links to share. So I'll find the grid that I've been using and looking at. And we haven't had a chance to get into the hamsters part or the spoons and some other bits.
You can play this game with me online. Okay, what was that?
So I'll be sharing that in the show notes along with Joanna's contact details and links to her YouTube and other things. And you'll find those wherever you listen to the podcast or on the Zencast website. Please follow us on the socials. On Twitter, we are at the Zencast. On Facebook, the Zencast. On everything, generally, the Zencast. It's quite simple, not too complicated. And before we go, as I always say, I mentioned one of B Squared's products, and today I'm going to talk about Steps for Life, which is one of our assessment frameworks within our Connecting Steps assessment software. It's designed for Key Stage 4 and beyond, so all the way up to as high as you need. And it looks at functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. So it's preparing them for adulthood. And rather than me telling you all about it, let's hear from one of our schools who use our framework. And they said, we introduced Steps for Life, having experienced the benefits of using Connecting Steps. It enables us to assess the relevant skills our post-16 students are developing to prepare them for adult life. Steps for Life is a very similar format to B Square's other frameworks that we are already using in school. And this means staff are already competent and confident in using it. And also student information transfers, which saves so much time. So to find out more about Steps for Life or any of our other assessment frameworks, visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our software. So thank you for listening to the podcast. We'll be back soon with another episode. So goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Bye everyone.